Today, we are talking about how to flip the script and rethink bilingual assessment and practice. And we have Dr. Genesis Arismendi. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much for having. Looking forward to chatting more about flipping the script.
Awesome. And this is really based on the work that you're doing and a recent article that came out, which we're going to share at the end. But we're going to kind of go through that article and look at the methods and the major findings and the conclusions. And that's our hope that by the time everyone leaves here today or is listening to this or watching it, that they'll be able to define the purpose of the FLiP task. And really quickly, do you mind telling us what FLiP means?
FLiP stands for Functional Language Proficiency.
Thank you. And you'll talk a little bit more about that soon. But then we want to talk about two key features of the FLiP methodology, including the design, the scenarios, and scoring system. Identify two major findings from the study that was published. And it is open access, right? So anybody that wants access to this article and learning more about the FLiP task can access it through, I believe, is it ASHA?
LSHSS.
Amazing. And we'll share that link at the end too. And then finally, we'll have you, or we hope that you'll be able to describe the conclusions of the study, including how the FLiP can inform culturally responsive practice and reduce misdiagnosis. Here's our agenda for today. We are starting with our welcomes and introductions. We'll talk about why FLiP matters. We'll talk about the task design and framework, the findings from the participants, the clinical and educational implications, and then we will wrap up at the end. Genesis, do you mind coming on and sharing your bio first?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Genesis Arismendi. I'm the director and principal investigator of the Bilingualism and the Brain in Education and Language Lab. And I'm an assistant professor at the University of Arizona in Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences and in Cognitive Science. I have been a certified bilingual speech language pathologist for over 10 years, and I've had the opportunity to practice in pretty much all of the settings. So I've been in early intervention, I've been in elementary and middle schools, I've been in high schools, I've been in outpatient rehabilitation clinics, I've done telehealth and home health, and now I'm doing a little bit more serving bilingual communities within the criminal justice system and doing forensic bilingual speech language pathology. And that's been exciting to start looking at different cases, different backgrounds, different experiences nationally. But where my practice has primarily been is in Arizona, New Mexico, and in Texas. My PhD was in speech, language, and hearing sciences. I graduated in 2019 from the University of Arizona. So I'm back home now, and it's exciting to be doing research in my own community. And my postdoctoral training, I chose to go outside of the discipline into the field of education in order to get a better understanding of what all of the other practitioners that are working with the same group of students understand about bilingual development and how to best serve our students. And so my first postdoctoral training experience was at the University of New Mexico in educational psychology, and purposefully extended that into special education and equity promotion at UT Austin. So it's been a long journey, and most of my research is focused on mitigating these disparities and advancing equity in education and in healthcare for bilingually developing students. And I often apply implementation science frameworks in order to best serve these needs for our communities, to get the research out into our communities and start making an impact today. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that's incredible. I love all of the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing about that. And it's really important work that you're doing too. So thank you for that. What exactly is implementation science? Are you going to talk about that a little bit, or is it something you can briefly describe here?
Yeah, I can describe it here. So, implementation science is the science of getting the research out into the community. So, better understanding what are the things that are impacting the delivery of this research, this intervention, this practice, this change in policy, this behavior in practice into the community. So, oftentimes it takes in the research 14 years for that research to get into the hands of the communities and the people that need it most. So it's not enough for us to be doing research, but not getting it out into the educators' hand, to the SLP's hands, to the family's hands, to the community that's working with all of these folks that we work with in speech language pathology. And my experiences in clinic, in practice, being a practitioner oriented toward being a practitioner first has opened my eyes to a lot of the reasons why there are still gaps in our care, where we have the research, we have so much knowledge, but it's not quite getting to the hands of the people that need it most. And so this is a new field, and well, newer to the field of speech language pathology and audiology, but there's been some great strides in moving this work forth. And kind of little plug here, there's going to be the first book in implementation science coming out next month. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be published through Brooks Publishing, and lots of great leaders talking about what this looks like in the field of speech language pathology and audiology. And so we can start really creating that impact in our patients, students, community members.
Thank you so much for giving that description. Yeah, I've actually seen it come up quite a bit recently, and that's why I wanted you to dive into it a little bit more. And I didn't realize it was so new. Is this from another field, or is this new across all fields, really?
It's existed in more of the medical and health professions to determine patient uptake of XYZ or XYZ behavior or prescription or you name it, right? And
Mhm.
so that's what's been the inspiration to bridge it into the field of speech language pathology. But we also see lots of great implementation science happening in the field of education, right? Where researchers are in the classroom working with the teachers to ensure that that intervention is being delivered and across a variety of different classrooms. So there's a lot of inspiration to draw from in a variety of different fields, but I think we've been so focused on generating knowledge all of these years, but not quite the understanding and how to get it out. And that's the goal here.
That's great. Well, if you are just tuning in for the first time, maybe on YouTube or on podcasts, my name is Vinita Lipback. I go by she, her, hers. I've been an SLP since 2014. I'm the host of the Speechy Side Up podcast, which is part of the Tassel Learning Network, and I'm also the CE content consultant for Tassel. I own a very small private practice specializing in early intervention and AAC in South Florida. I recently started adjunct teaching an AAC graduate level course at our local university. And this summer, I became a doctoral SLPD student at Northwestern University. And I'll share my financial disclosures quickly since I'm already on. I have ownership interest in Speechy Side Up LLC and Tassel Learning LLC. How about you?
I'm a salaried employee at the University of Arizona.
Perfect. Oh, yeah, I guess I should mention that I'm also an adjunct employee at FAU. All right, so let's dive in. What gap in the field were you hoping to address when you developed the FLiP task?
So there were a variety of gaps that I kept experiencing and seeing in my practice. And as I became a doctoral student and started digging more into the research and how that aligns with what I was seeing in the clinical space. And that is that oftentimes standardized tests and clinical practices often fail to consider the complex language environments that bilingual children experience, and then also how they use their language in real life. And this is problematic because it continues to lead to both an over and under representation in special education for bilingually developing students or emerging bilingual students who start to learn their second language when they enter the school system. And it also continues to reinforce these deficit views of bilingualism, not just in the educational space, in the clinical space, but in society. And these lack of tools that can address these complex language environments and their own experiences are also prominent when we're thinking about the experiences that that reflect bilingual children's own lived realities and experiences So, in thinking through what that might look like, it took a little bit of time to figure out what exactly we could do to address this issue, but also the consideration of the standard of determining proficiency or language proficiency, oftentimes being captured through the standard that is input and output calculations, right? So, a lot of us know we got to collect that information. That's not a call out to say this isn't valuable information, right? It does help us a lot to better understand the communicative environments of our students. It's grounded in the literature. There are many reasons to collect this information. And these input output calculations kind of show us, okay, over the course of a day, how much is a child listening to the L1 first language and L2 second language? Also, how much are they using these languages, right? In L1, L2, and what is the proportion of the day that they are going back and forth or using any given language? So when I was working in the schools in a majority minority school system in a rural border town community like my own, that was my own, better corrected there. I kept seeing and collecting this information that could have looked something like, okay, this child is 60% English and 40% Spanish based on my determinations of this input output calculation. However, I also have another child I see in an hour that also has 60% English and 40% Spanish. And then I have a third child and a fourth child and a fifth child that also have these same numbers, but they present so differently in their linguistic skills, what they're applying, their vocabulary. One might have difficulties with accessing words, another one might have more difficulty in formulating sentences. Another one might have more difficulties with morphological endings, and they did not look alike. And that was something that kept making me want to dig into, like, well, we're getting this number, but like, what does it tell us about this child in front of me when I have many 60/40s that are so different from one another? And so a lot of this is oftentimes based on these monolingual norms that are the foundation in thinking through, well, okay, they turn it on here and they turn it off there, and that's how they keep their languages separate. But these norms strip away the context, the purpose, and the functional intent that bilingual users often have to keep in mind in every single interaction that they have, which are essential to how bilingual children and bilingual communities use language across settings. So this is the groundwork and the foundation of the experience, but it was primarily informed by by continuing to be a clinician throughout my practice and understanding these connections between what is advocated for in the research, but also what that presents like in clinical practice and where these breakdowns can occur when an SLP is experiencing such little time to collect all of the data, double the data with bilingual children. And it impacts the care and the equity to advance their skills.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. I like this visual of the different bilingual profiles as well. So I'm sure as we get to the methodology, you're going to talk about what specific target or functional skills you're actually looking for, right? So maybe we
Yes.
can go ahead and jump to that because I'm so excited to see what it is. So tell us about the flip task, how it was designed, and how you capture both functional and linguistic equivalents in bilingual children's communication.
Mm, Thanks for that question. So the flip was purposefully designed to reflect how bilingual children communicate in real life. So at this point in the journey, I was digging into the cognitive literature, and I kept finding also all of these disparities in, does bilingualism enhance cognition? Does it not? Is there an advantage? And we still continue to see this research move forth today. Of course, there's a bilingual advantage, right? But there's also the more languages that we have, the more more we're able to connect with more communities, with more people, expand our understanding of how their perspectives are in the world and how we can better understand the human experience, right? And as I was thinking through what could advance this input output proportion or percentages, I try to go back into my own lived experiences. So I grew up in Nogales, Arizona, which is right on the border of Arizona and Sonora, Mexico. And those experiences navigating a bilingual and a bicultural space where over 95% of the people around me also experience the same kind of linguistic environment and linguistic development. I thought, okay, well, what were we doing? What are some ways that we could tap into our input or our output? And ultimately, I came to this idea of language brokering. And and this refers to the need to communicate information from one language to your other language for somebody in your life that doesn't have access to one of the languages. So language brokers distinguish themselves from being translators in that translators are people who went to school, they studied, they have a background in the vocabulary, the scenarios, the situations, the ethical practice of translating. And that's quite different from the experience of a language broker, where language brokers do the best that they can in the situations that they're in, and they may not have the vocabulary for it. They may not know a whole lot about the situation, but they will use the language flexibly to communicate the need for people in their lives. And so my experiences being a language broker for my monolingual Spanish speaking grandmother, every time we came to Tucson, Arizona, to the mall, to the stores, to go shopping, it was, okay, sir, do you have this shoe in size 7? Right? So these were the common experiences. Yeah, well, I don't have the shoe in size 7, but I have an 8. Will that work for you? Was the No, okay. So it's a back and forth exchange in one direction and into the other direction. So the requisites, as I started building out and thinking through this a little bit more, was okay, well, in order to do that successfully, we have to have both receptive knowledge in both L1 and L2, that is first language, second language, right? But we also have to have our expressive skills developed in both L1 and L2. And those expressive skills could look very differently, but if you can still communicate the intended message of the speaker to the listener and it accomplishes the same goal, then that works, right? There might be some changes in the way maybe the vocabulary is missing there, or maybe there's a morphological ending that's missing, but does it achieve the same functional purpose or message at the end of the day, right? So this pushes beyond vocabulary checklists or morphosyntax prompts to spotlight how children use both of their languages strategically, socially, and meaningfully across these contexts and across these languages with an end goal of being a helper. And these are grounded in everyday culturally relevant scenarios that honor their languages and their social experiences. So as I reflected, I tapped into my own lived knowledge and I thought all of the different scenarios where I had to do this. From there, I wrote those all down as potential scenarios where we would create FLiP scenarios to have students help people understand each other. So I conferred with the literature, and there were many different articles published, but these were primarily focused on older children in high school and in middle school. So there was a gap there. But those were still the areas where language brokering was required of these students and where it had already been documented in the literature that these were settings and situations that mirrored my own experience. So in thinking of these scenarios like help at the store, at the doctor's office, ordering food, requesting an appointment, talking to a parent at school, these kinds of experiences, I thought through, okay, what are the different scenarios, the items that they're going to have to need to broker information back and forth that are age appropriate, that are going to tap into linguistic skill across a good range of bilingual development so that it can apply to many more users, right? And the focus here was to create it at the point of first, second, and third grade development. So in designing each item, there was the consideration of, this vocabulary word might be too complex if we're administering to a first grader. Have to think through what vocabulary terms are going to have a good range of difficulty to understand where students are, but also some ease in there that are more communication that is found in daily activities, right? So can you call the beauty salon and put an appointment for with Anna today at 2? Okay. Right? Something like that. And then back and forth. Sorry, we only have an opening today at 5. There's no one way to say these things. And this is what the beauty is that's driving this research, but also it's grounded in a lot of theory. And these theories have been around for longer than I have, oftentimes, which include the theory of natural translation, which was published back in the 70s, where bilinguals are continuously translating information in their mind. I might learn something in English, but then I have to communicate something in my other language to my family member. They never taught me those words when I was in school and learning that content. I translated the information, the content, the knowledge, and shared that information with my family member at home, right? So this flexibility and the understanding of language and how it's stored, retrieved, used in the mind is also highlighting these processes in bilingual communication, which includes language brokering, but also includes this also new term to the field, relatively new term to the field of speech language pathology that has been around in the field of bilingual education for quite a long time now. That's called translanguaging. And that is the unified, flexible use of language between one to another and considering it as a fluid, flexible, dynamic, unified process. So lots of things coming into the need to consider functional language proficiency because that distinguishes itself quite a bit from academic language and all of the specific terminology that's oftentimes only heard and used during class time in the educational environment. And if those languages, if for the majority of children that are learning bilingually in English only school systems.
Wow. Yeah. Very, very important. So would this be like the next level for a child who's learning, multiple languages, not only to have that academic proficiency, but then to have the functional language proficiency? Okay.
Mm.
And then the ultimate goal of the flip task is to have functional language proficiency in both receptive and expressive language skills. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're
Okay.
looking at functional language proficiency in order to better understand how they're using language that might be quite different from what we're seeing on standardized tests, right?
Mm,
That's a very unfamiliar experience to
mhm,
do a standardized test for kids in first grade, right? Like the look at the dog. The dog is
mhm,
jumping. Now, what did he do? Right? And the child is like, what do you want me to do? Right? There's oftentimes prompts and experience with administering items on a standardized test to ensure that they know what they're expected to do. But that's also unfamiliar and it creates a tension in different communities when the provider, the adult in the room should know the answers to these questions, and children are expected to like wait for them to say
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
So it can create that kind of tension, but also the understanding of the experiences of oftentimes minoritized bilingual students where there is a disconnect between their home environment and their school environment and the people that they encounter within the school environment and how they're expected to leave their home language at the door and go straight into English only as soon as they enter the school system. So it should address not just the understanding of functional language proficiency and capture how language might be used in their daily life, but also as a way, as a culturally responsive practice in order to initiate speech language therapy. So the FLiP itself can do a variety of different things that doesn't rely on capturing the proficiency or the measurement. If it's only used as a culturally responsive practice to initiate and address the cultural, linguistic, and environmental mismatches that bilingual students experience in the school system, that's that's a game changer, because we're considering how uncomfortable it can be to be asked in a SLP context or in a testing context where, let's think through the demographics of speech language pathology, 92% white and monolingual. So if I'm getting pulled, the likelihood is that I'm going to get pulled by a white monolingual English speaking woman, and then they're going to ask me to speak in Spanish in a space that I'm not familiar with speaking Spanish. If anything, it might be discouraged to speak Spanish in school, or I might have gotten punished or sent to the principal's office for not staying to English or speaking Spanish with the other students in my class. So when an unfamiliar new person comes and pulls me from my home language or from my school environment or classroom environment, and I go into this therapy room with this new person that I do not know, and they start asking me to say things about in Spanish, I'm going to think I'm in trouble. I'm going to wonder why they're asking me to start speaking in Spanish when I've never been asked to speak Spanish at school. Am I in trouble? Am I going to get put in a different classroom? Are they going to send me away? And we have to think through what that means in today's social context related to safety and requesting students to speak Spanish. That's going to be something that has to be at the forefront of the practitioner base that's serving our students, because it's discouraged, and we're seeing that happening from the very top at the federal level. So we need to we need to understand why a child might be resistant, reluctant, performing lower, or not wanting to perform in Spanish, or maybe inadvertently or purposefully choosing to give wrong answers so that they can demonstrate that they speak English. Right? These are so many social contexts that are often missed or not captured within our understanding of serving communities that are different from us, that we really need to start thinking about. So if the FLiP can elevate their cultural linguistic skills and assets from the very beginning as they're meeting this new SLP, before you get into some of these other experiences, it can, in the testing and evaluation and setting up the rapport and working with the students, that already can open up the door to more culturally responsive care, ethical care, and equitable care.
Yeah, so important. And thank you for breaking that down. And I don't know where I had the confusion about how it's doing the assessment, but it makes a lot of sense to go from using these standardized assessments that are testing more academic language to using something like FLiP that looks more like their functional language use. So thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious with the language brokering. I'm not fully bilingual, but I grew up in South Florida, and so I have friends and family who are multilingual, bilingual, and I've seen the language brokering. And what part of that are you looking at that is more social as well, and their attitudes towards doing the language brokering? I had friends who were teenagers who had to do it, and they just were not up to doing the task, or they were not happy that they had to do it. It was like they were the person that was responsible for doing it because they were the only person that could do it in that context. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. I'll stop you there too, though. You are
Okay.
bilingual, and I think the reluctance to claim the bilingual skills, right, are something that I'm also noticing in the field that people really need to claim and build upon. But I think there's so much already ingrained shame or guilt or fear that the language is going to be attacked as wrong or incorrect or not native speech sounding, right? All of these different things that we've already internalized about our own languages, whether it's L1 or L2 or L3, that, don't actually reflect the competence that you have with your languages, right? So claim it. And, I want to see more people saying, yeah, I have all of these languages and it's wonderful. But going to your question, with all of the students that participated, so it was in this work, it was bilingual children in first, second, and third grade. So there were 30 in each category. And all of the children were able to do it. At the end, in order to get a little bit more information about them, and their experience with it, I asked them, have you ever done something like that? Have you ever helped people understand each other before? And so many of them gave us that information about, yeah, I've done that. I do it all the time. And who do you do it for? Oh, I do it for my nana, my tata, my mom, my brother, David in class, right? It's so many different students or so many different experiences. Oh, tell me, where do you do it? When I go to Mexico and my tío asks me about this, and that, then I have to tell them or teach them the words. Or when we go to the drive-through, my mom says they're not going to understand her, so they make me scream from the back of the window so that I can put in the order at McDonald's, right? All of these different experiences. And with the context of teaching them that they're good helpers. This is where they say, I like helping. This is good. I like to help my family. And a lot of them shared that experience in the first, second, and third grade. But I'm going to go back a little bit here to give you an example of what they hear in the very first video clip. It's me standing in front of a wall, and I just say, hi, my name is Genesis, and I'm like you. I speak English, pero también I mostly speak English at school, but sometimes I use both to talk to my friends. So what you're going to be doing today is watching videos of some of my friends who need help understanding each other. Some only speak English, y otros. So the cool thing about the fact that we know both languages is that you can help them understand each other. So here's an example of what we're going to do. And then we chat a little bit. But already, if that's the first experience after meeting the SLP, they're walking to the therapy room, the SLP says something like, we're going to turn on this, you're going to help some of my friends because I know you speak English, un poquito that, or I want to see how you help some of my friends. Here's the videos. Okay, and then they hear that, right? That creates a different environment than, okay, it's time to, the boy jumps. What did he do? Right there at the very beginning. So, there's so many different things there that this can address, but over time and trying to get this work out, there was a lot of resistance and pushback in that it doesn't reflect the lived realities of students, or that it doesn't reflect the needs of SLPs, or that I've heard it all about this task before it finally made its way into the world. But a lot of my experiences and what I saw experts, reviewers saying about this, I thought, whoa, you clearly don't know my community. And that is what pushed me to learn more about these experiences beyond the ones that I learned of the children in first, second, and third grade. If the reviewers weren't believing the kids, they should review dozens and dozens, over 100 now, of adults that live in along the US-Mexico borderlands who do similar things. And so this work reflects a lot of their experiences with language brokering. That includes the same scenarios that I just shared with you about the children talking about it, but these are adults reflecting on their experiences as children, but also how many of them continue to serve that role today for different people in their community, or still for their family members who wait for them to come home or visit over the holidays, to put the appointment to go to the doctor's office because they are the translator, they are the language broker when they go to the medical appointment, because they do not trust the translators and they do not trust the doctors. And they want to have a family member to do that has served that role. So if we already think about what that means, that language brokers are still doing this as adults for family members, where the fear and resistance comes in for communities, as I mentioned earlier, what does safety mean in the healthcare environment now, in the educational environment now, in the clinical environment? So that's work to come forth, and to also address how the FLiP can be used in adult populations, because it works from, at least the populations that I've worked with, 18 to 92 years of age, over 115 participants at this time.
Wow, that's a nice size group for speech language pathology.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Well, I can't wait to see some of the results that you find from using this task. And you're going to tell us now about how it was designed to capture both functional and linguistic equivalence in bilingual children's communication. So, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so as SLPs, we want to carry the linguistic equivalence, and in the item selection for each of these, there is a scoring rubric that we developed in my team and the research team that was working with me at the time that addresses all of these areas of linguistic skill, which include vocabulary, grammar, sentence formulation, fluency with the item, and functional equivalence. So this rating scale is designed between 0, 1, and 2, and each of them is based on the performance of the child or the participant. And the functional equivalence, this is part of the rating scale that looks at the success of the translation or interpretation of the information. So it doesn't have to be a word for word translation. Does it still satisfy the intended message or the intended purpose? So if it's, can you find the brooms, or can you ask the gentleman if you where the brooms are at the store, right? Then the child can say, Señor, you can satisfy it that way. But then it could also be satisfied by walking up to the gentleman and saying, I'm missing all of the a dónde, but it's still satisfying the message, right? So we want to give them credit for understanding that flexible use of language, but they might not get some of these points in the other domains. So this is where the rating form can address some of these areas of, okay, they tend to have difficulties with the vocabulary consistently. And all of these are rated through like a language sample, short language sample. Most of these are 1 to 2 sentence utterances. So you'd imagine that it's not going to take as much time as SALT or a language sample narrative, right? So 1 to 2 sentences. And at the end of it, you might have high functional equivalence and have some difficulties along linguistic equivalence that at the bottom of the rating sheet, you can tally the frequency of what you're seeing and make notes to yourself as a clinician about what you're already identifying within their functional language skills. So, for example, it might be, ooh, they tend to struggle with that past tense ed and all of these different items, but and propositions maybe, but maybe this is something I'll take a closer look in when I'm administering some of these standardized tests. That might just be a feature of the nature of the task going back and forth, but I'm going to pay attention to that as I move forth. So it sets up the context for planning the rest of your SLP evaluation, but also in your interpretations as you're writing your reports and your results, right? Like, okay, these are some of the commonalities I'm noticing, or hey, in this FLiP, they're doing wonderfully in a lot of this day-to-day communication. But when it really comes down to a lot of the specific academic jargon, vocabulary, features of the academic language, right? They're starting to demonstrate struggles here. And this is where we might have to consider more closely age of acquisition, the experience, this input output, and learn more about what the presentation of language is.
Thank you for sharing that. I like the visuals and how we can look at the tasks that are required. I imagine that this could be even adapted for other populations too, like just making assessments more functional in general. So it's a really, really great starting point, but I can imagine how helpful this would be for bilingual children as well. Like, what about children who are multilingual? Could this be used with them too? How would it be done? And this is only Spanish and English?
Only Spanish and English at this
Okay.
time. This is the first phase of it, so it's going to keep improving, and we're making it, streamlining it, and making it more accessible and usable for a variety of different age ranges for the Spanish English population. But, I'd love to see it in all the languages.
Yeah, that would be great. And then are you working on standardizing it or getting internal and external validity for it?
Absolutely. So we already have that.
Great.
And because it was so much information, that was a core feature. There was item response theory applied, classical test theory was used throughout the decision making in the process of the item selection, of using converging measures with SALT and their performance there. So because it's such a big manuscript, it was kind of like, well, let's get this first bit out. Let me make sure that we can get it out into the world after 5 years to try to convince folks about this is real and kids can do it. But also now that it's out, right? This was published in July, so I can now use that as a reference point to say, here's all the data that I couldn't use as part of this other one. But yeah, that's ready to go for the first, second, and third graders. And I hope to present that other work with the item response theory in the adults here in the next year.
Amazing. Can't wait for that.
Yeah.
So, what did the results of the study tell us about bilingual children's everyday communicative competence?
Well, there's a lot that's oftentimes overlooked and not captured in the traditional assessment practices that we have been following, not just in the field of speech language pathology, but just in assessment broadly of bilingually developing students. We know bilingual children possess, bilingual communities possess rich, contextually grounded communicative competence. And this decision making is captured as well about their language use, what they choose to prioritize in this real world environment. And, oh, I have to make sure this person understands what this person's needs are. Let me get that information and get it into serving the need there, right?
Mhm.
And it also draws upon their full range of their linguistic repertoires, and that's really honoring where they're at, right? That's oftentimes missing. It's like, okay, we're going to do English today, and next time I see you, you're going to do Spanish. Or, okay, primero en inglés. Okay, let's do all of the different cosas, and then all of the English. Now we're going to do these here. So you caught a little bit there of my own cross-linguistic influence that came in where thought I was speaking English, but I was speaking Spanish. That's the nature of this connectedness of language that often trickles in, that we don't, if we're not constantly needing to engage our inhibitory processes to assimilate or to be in a space where our language is understood for monolingual ears, right? Rather than the communities that we're from, where doing that is often okay and accepted. That is familiar to them. So it's exciting because they can draw from both of their languages in a task that's familiar. They can use it flexibly and purposefully. The fact that we don't penalize for not have, or we don't penalize when they have missing items in their linguistic equivalents. We want to honor the functional elements of their linguistic knowledge. And the way I think about bilingual development and bilingual language use is that it's like jazz, right? We all have the words and we all have the different ways of combining those words, but oftentimes the way we choose to use the words and the way we choose to present the message depends so greatly on the flexibility that we have on the listeners around us. So if we are in a space that we perceive that's scary, and maybe Spanish or another language is going to be problematic for their own safety, for their own mental health, for their own, yeah, for their own mental health, they'll say, I don't speak that language. I don't choose to do that here, right? And if we're thinking about that, that already starts putting us in a different mental space to consider the psychological elements that are behind language use in bilingual communities. So, and how that can lead to mental health difficulties across the lifespan. So, bilingually developing students as well, we know that they are experiencing the world and their language use in very complex ways. And we know that they can language broker as early as first grade. This extends that literature from the middle and high school aged children to children in first grade here in the borderlands, but that also applies to students in bilingual communities like Boyle Heights in LA, Pilsen in Chicago, right? That the South Florida, all around, right? It's living around us, and that flexibility that students, users have with their languages is something to really admire.
Yeah, definitely. How did you choose the stimuli or the real world task for the flip?
So the real world tasks, the scenarios were through the literature and my experience. Then as I reflected on what the nature of these exchanges could look like at the store, literally things that I did for my Spanish speaking grandmother. And I wrote them down. Then I did an analysis of what they looked like, how the different sentences were structured, what kinds of different words were being presented. Were there some that were more later developing that I need to consider that a child in first grade may not have that vocabulary term and might discourage them right off the bat here? So after developing all of the scenarios, then I did a linguistic analysis of the vocabulary, the length of the items, because we don't want to work, it's not a working memory task, right? So that's another thing that we considered in the design here and thinking of, okay, this sentence structure is good because maybe it'll capture the third graders that have more advanced knowledge here in using these languages, but also can give us that graded item response theory where the stronger your languages are, longer time developing your languages, the easier certain items will be and more difficult for those that have just started in their learning journeys. So it's not designed for monolingual children, right? But there's still an opportunity to use it in a variety of ways for early emerging students for language development.
Oh, that's great. And you said that it was mostly within a store context. Are there other scenarios too, or is that something you're working on?
Yeah, so there's at the store, at the doctor's office, setting
Okay.
an appointment, helping a teacher at a store, ordering food, and yeah, it's my working memory is limited there, but there's two more.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, just all types of contexts that a child or an adult would be engaged in on a regular basis, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. So it might be like, hi, is there anything I can help you find? And
Yeah.
then, hola, ¿hay ayuda? Right?
Mhm.
And then back and forth. Ojo, do you have this shirt in red? Sorry, we only have it in black,
Mhm.
but we can order one for you. Dice, yeah, but can you send it to our store? Yeah, we can have it delivered to your house. Dice que sí. Right? So that was the
Yeah.
first scenario.
Yeah. Forgive me if you mentioned this, but in the flip task, are you assessing them just in Spanish, or is there a separate section for assessing their ability to translate in English? Does that make sense?
Yes, it's both directions.
Okay.
So the information is translated in or interpreted in one direction. So would you like, is there anything I can help you find? Dijo, do you have this shirt in red? So every other item is in the other language. So they're constantly
Mm.
going back and forth. And if
Okay.
oftentimes, if they need more prompts, it's like, oh, but remember, she speaks English. We need to tell her in English. And then that person is on the slide the whole time in order to help with the prompting that way. And that helps a lot. First graders need to hear it more often and with more prompt, considering their working memory capacities. The third graders have it down. Have it down. Same with the adults. They can finish it in about 7 minutes and don't require hearing it multiple times, oftentimes. So it shows a lot of their ease as I've looked at this, where, oh, I know it's easier for me when I hear it in Spanish and say it in English, but my production in Spanish is a little bit more difficult. So that's what I'm feeling there. And that's what the adults have shared with me. And that gives them their insight too. They recognize where some of the challenges might be emerging in their second language use or their first language use.
Oh, thank you for sharing that and providing clarification on that. It's really, really interesting. And I'm sure it's like going to be so helpful. How do SLPs get their hands on the flip task?
So they've been emailing me at this time.
Okay.
I send
Okay.
along the link, and anybody interested is welcome to have it. I'm working to make it more accessible, usable, but this is the first phase, and SLPs have dozens already have reached out to request it and are starting to implement it into their own school districts or SLP teams across the nation now. So it's super exciting to see it come to life now and be used as the SLP chooses to.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll try to get the word out as well. I mean, do you want more SLPs to have access to it, or are you trying to keep the pool small?
No, we want all
Okay.
SLPs that are interested to get their hands on it. The more accessible we can make this, the better. As I mentioned, implementation science, right? We got to get it out there. I'm not doing work to put it on the shelves. I'm doing work to get it into the hands of the people that need it. And that might be our clinicians, our students, and our communities.
Amazing. Well, we could definitely arrange something. We have a pretty large newsletter list, so we'll coordinate that with you and maybe we can get it to that group. What type, you mentioned like working memory can be a threat to internal validity. What other types of threats to internal validity have you come across?
One of the bigger ones is some resistance from students or from people that say, oh, immediately the psychological element comes in, that there is a fear that I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to say it wrong. I'm going to be judged if I don't get it correctly or if I say a word wrong. And it's starting to expose a lot of these real psychosocial elements to the language production in bilingual users and how there is a lot of linguistic shame and a lot of linguistic guilt when it is not up to speed. And this is a challenge, not just that their languages were attacked for not being English speaking enough or not being Spanish speaking enough. Or you can think about this across all language speaker groups, right? It's not unique to the Spanish speaking community, but this is where the work was grounded. And I think when that anxiety level comes up already in that experience, it's so eye-opening because it reflects the realities of what languages have been for a lot of people and how they've been looked down upon different people in their communities, whether they are people that are in their communities or people that are on the outside looking in and judging a community. But oftentimes the languaging is attacked by monolingual lenses, right? It's oftentimes the monolingual Spanish speaker that's attacking the Spanish of what people will call a pocho or a no sabo, or what I'm working on a manuscript right now that's attaching that meaning to the language attrition and the language loss. That is a cultural phenomenon where people attack it, even though people are in the process of developing it, and it's not good enough for the monolingual Spanish speaker. But same thing for the English speaking, right? Oh, well, you have an accent or you said it this way, or all of these different things that it's not good enough. So there's a constant struggle to have to navigate that trickles in to the performance that is anxiety of production. And we have to remember that the majority of the world is multilingual. They know more than one language. That's normalized outside of the United States. It's
Mhm.
expected. So, whose standards are we trying to accommodate when the majority of English speakers of the world are not heritage or native speakers of the language?
Yeah, absolutely.
So honoring and being culturally responsive within the classroom environment and embracing the bilingualism, embracing the languages, the cultures, the identities, the use. Yes, we might make an error here and there, but everybody does, right? And recognizing that as not blaming bilingualism, but just that's how language works. We're not always 100% accurate. And that's something we also need to think about as SLPs and how we're putting a lens on bilingual users versus monolingual users and why there might be such a greater focus when a bilingual child makes errors or perceived code switching that might be confusion that isn't confusion at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do you see the flip shaping assessment practices and reducing misdiagnosis of bilingual children in the future?
Yeah, so the flip hopefully is being seen as a call to action that we have been really needing to work toward shifting toward more asset-based frameworks that are ecologically grounded and reflect and consider how bilingual users actually use and experience language. That's a really big thing. And considering the integration of more culturally responsive tools that can meet the needs of our clinicians and our researchers in a variety of ways. Maybe not for measurement, but for a culturally responsive practice, or just to get more information about how this child communicates, right? There's so many different ways we can do things that can go beyond the standardized, that can be problematic and oftentimes biased because it doesn't fit all populations that we're seeking that we serve. And what needs to change is not just what we assess, but how and the why. So Here, there's a real big focus on the communicative intent and does it achieve the purpose of the Communication Act? It's prioritizing that over linguistic perfection, right? This fluidity of language use. And it's a recognition of bilingualism as a resource, not as this risk factor that we've oftentimes heard about or literature contextualize. Oh, well, they're bilingual, they're more likely to have XYZ, right? Or they're coming from a home that doesn't speak English. Oh, time to be concerned because they're at risk, right? Or there's so many different nuances there in the perception and understanding of bilingual development across the disciplines that really requires us to come together and have at least the same solid foundations in our understanding of bilingual development, myths about bilingualism that are still commonly understood and believed, like that bilingualism causes delays, disabilities, and confusion, that are absolutely not true. And those are continuously perpetuated by even practitioners like pediatricians, teachers, family members. Strangers are doing this, and that makes it a really difficult space for bilingualism to flourish when it is also attacked when it's not following a monolingual standard in either language. And, it promotes continued monolingualism in the United States.
Yeah. Yep. Major issues. I can see why the FLiP is so needed and how it's going to help shape those assessment practices and reduce misdiagnosis. Are you guys trying to implement AI into this at all in the future, knowing that AI is becoming such a strong tool to be used in assessment?
Yeah, so we're seeing how it works well with the transcription process, recognizing that 8% of our SLPs are multilingual and not all of them speak Spanish, right? There's a variety of different languages represented within that 8%. So if we can make it more user friendly such that the AI can transcribe the English production of the child, the Spanish production, is the AI able to be bilingual and bilingual in a way that the SLP is interested about the language features? I think it can be, right? But still TBD, to be determined.
Okay. Yeah, that's great that you're thinking about that. So you shared some helpful resources here. Did you want to talk about any of these in particular?
Sure, yeah. So quite a few of these are just research that has been getting a lot of the background. The first link is the Two Languages, One Mind. I did the College of Science lecture series here in March that was focused on communication. So mine was on human communication and bilingual users. And so a lot of the research or the background behind FLiP is presented here, but also how it's connected to a lot of other things within SLP practice, bilingual development, and the recognition within our communities to understand bilingual development and support bilingual development. The Language Brokering in the Borderlands is a podcast that I did that was funded through the Mellon Foundation and the Confluence Center at the University of Arizona that funded my adult research that I've been conducting on the FLiP and their experiences with language brokering. So that's a podcast. The next one is bilinguistics background in the asset-based language assessment for bilingual learners. So much like what we talked about today, but it really going into every single step of the FLiP, the development, the considerations, what it looks like. So more of the research behind that in bilinguistics, the links there. And then I also did an Arizona Science NPR podcast that is a shorter background in promoting the Two Languages, One Mind presentation. And the last one is the Translators documentary. So good. It's about 20 minutes long, but it highlights the experiences of child language brokers and see the realities. As many of what I mentioned earlier, experts don't believe the children as young as the ones that we're working with can do this. And the fact is we've been doing it and we can do it well. And last is the QR code for the LSHSS article that was published in July. It's accessible, open access, free to download. Have at it. Please, please, please read it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Please feel free to reach out. Talking to your teams, I'm all in.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this is the article that you just shared through the QR code too, if anybody just missed it. And here is your website, Instagram, and email. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about your research today and where you're going to be taking this. I can't wait to follow along.
Thank you so much, Vanita, for the invitation. This was such a pleasure, and I appreciate you putting the spotlight on the FLiP and how we can better serve our communities and all the things you do to get that research into practice. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right. Hi. Hi, Dr. Arismendi. I think you just have to unmute. Right next to your picture, there's a little microphone. There you go. Perfect.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you saw our comment. The editing software that we always use went overzealous this time and cut out too much. And there were some really great examples in there. So Dr. Arismendi said that she would give us the live examples this time. But let me throw up some of the questions that we had too. And then did you want to try sharing your screen as I put these comments up?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Let's give it a try here.
Let's see how we can put these questions. Okay, there we go. Perfect. I've never tried this question feature on this program before, but it looks nice. It looks like it's easy for everybody to see. So whenever you're ready, I could read them for you, and then we can just go one by one.
Okay. Sounds great. I clicked share screen. Can you see the picture of me standing in front of a wall?
Yes, and
Oh,
there you go. You see it?
yeah. So I'll give y'all a demo first, since some of those examples were cut out, and I'd love for y'all to get a sense of what this looks like, and then would love to connect with some of the questions that have already been asked. Vanita, does that sound okay?
Perfect.
Okay, so this is that intro video when the students first pop in, or the first thing they're going to be seeing. So
Hi there, my name is Genesis and I'm like you. I speak English, pero también hablo español. I mostly speak English at school y hablo español en mi casa con mi familia, but sometimes I use both to talk to my friends. So what you're going to be doing today is watching videos of some of my friends who need help understanding each other. Some only speak English and unos solo hablan español. So the cool thing about the fact that we know both languages is that we can help them understand each other. So here's an example of what you're going to be doing.
okay, so from there, I'd show them a 1-minute clip of what language brokering looks like from that translator's film. It's wonderful. I'll give you a little taste for what this looks like.
Did you have difficulty understanding your book?
Yeah,
Like mom.
little. Es que si tuve dificultades pues entendiendo el libro, pues.
Oh, el libro de ciencias.
Le dije que sí.
¿En qué yo lo puedo ayudar a usted? Porque parece que ahí no va bien su punteo. Está un poquito bajito. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que puede hacer para que mejore su calificación?
Well, my mom wants to know how can I get better in spelling, like what she can help me.
So here I explain a little bit more about what they're doing, how they're helping different people. And then they go into this orientation slide for every different scenario, where they're always going to see the English speaker on the right side, the Spanish speaker on the left-hand side, and then it shows where they are. So this would be the example of help at the store. From here, I'd go in and this corrects right now when I press play. So they would listen to the audio clip.
Hi, is there anything I can help you find?
And then here is where I'd say, ¿qué dijo? So they would say something like, dice que si necesitas ayuda, necesitas algo que estás buscando algo. It could be so many different ways to communicate that message. So from there, it's all audio recorded. Then we go into the next version. So here she wants to know if you have that shirt in red. She wants that in red. This shirt, but in red. Do you have that shirt in red? So many different ways to capture that message, right? And then we keep going back and forth.
Sorry, we only have that one in black. Do you want us to order one for you?
Dice que no, pero si quieres que te la ordene. Okay. And
Sí, pero pregúntale si me la pueden mandar a mi casa.
yeah, she wants to know if you could send it to her house though. And then last clip in the scenario,
Yes, we can have that delivered to your house.
I could say something like, sí, or I could say, ella dijo que sí se lo puede mandar a su casa, right? So there I had to check in with my languaging there, which direction I was going in. But it becomes a natural flow here with the process as they get used to it. And the reason to have these folks as the reminder here is like, oh, but remember, she speaks English. What did she say? And that's a nice way to prompt the students, especially those first graders. So we have calling to set up an appointment. So again, going back and forth, we have at the doctor's office with 2 English speakers from reception all the way to being with the doctor. And then a birthday party in Tucson, Arizona, since I know now this is going out nationally, that some people don't know where Tucson is. So, oh, it's a place called Tucson, right? And this is a birthday party, clips going back and forth here. Then there's one for ordering food, going back and forth there. And then a parent at school. So another example, just before I stop sharing here.
Can you tell this parent we have early release tomorrow?
Dice que van a salir temprano mañana.
Bueno, ¿y a qué hora salen de la escuela?
She wants to know what time they get out.
The kids are out at 1.
A la 1.
¿Y a qué hora se va el camión?
What time does the bus go? What time does it leave? When does the bus go? Right? So many different ways.
The bus leaves at 1:05.
A la 1:05. And that would be a demo of all of the things FLiP. So kind of an example of where you can see that linguistic equivalence, but also capturing the functional elements that we want to credit them for, saying, well, okay, 1:05, well, they didn't say, dijo que van a salir a las 1:05, right? So lots of different ways to measure that. And I hope that has clarified some of the questions that were in the chat. Thank you so much for the feedback. Really appreciate the excitement and eagerness to get your hands on this. I'd love to share it with you. So please reach out to me and I can send it your way.
Amazing. Thank you so much for showing that to us. I'm actually going to add. Today, we are talking about and bring it all the way to the end where your contact information is in case anybody wants to see this as we're going through the questions. But I loved seeing like how you actually use the FLiP because we didn't get to look through that when we did our initial interview. So that was really cool. So one of the questions says, and there's a checklist to help determine the language breakdown. I'll put it up here so you can see it too. Do you see that?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I created a rating sheet. Each of these would be transcribed, right? So they're at the single sentence level, maybe 2 sentences max, much different in the process for your own time in language sample analysis. So we'd tabulate everything between here. Let me see if I can share screen again here. 1 second.
I love that we're getting like a sneak peek behind the scenes.
Yes, get access to all the goods here. So these are all of the individual items and you'd have your transcript on the side of what they actually said. So then we have a rating sheet. I don't have that up right now, but I can show that to you as well, where you'd rate for vocabulary based on the rating sheet, whether it was a 0, 1, or 2, grammar for that production, 0, 1, or 2, sentence formulation, fluency. So that's more, did they get caught in mazes? Were there repetitions, reformulations, things like that? And then going into functional equivalence to tease apart that difference with the linguistic equivalence that we're looking at on this end. So let's say you had a 1 here and a 1 here, and you're noticing some things going on in the grammar with like past tense ED. So if it was the English, this one would be a production in Spanish. Hay algo que te pueda ayudar a encontrar, right? Maybe there was an error in one of these areas. You can start creating a little tally sheet for yourself, what kinds of things you're noticing. So is it in the tense? Is it in gender? Is it in number? Okay, they have this error, or they were having these difficulties across mostly gender in Spanish, but is that a concern? Well, we'll have to look at how long they've been learning the languages, what language pairs they are in Spanish and English, when the expected developmental growth changes from that, but also where we can start considering the variation in where their development is at that point in time. You can more closely look at your tally sheet here as you're going into your standardized tests, like, hey, articles seem to be a challenge during this in English. Let me look closely at the articles. So you'd have that, and then you'd rate across all of these, and you can put some notes to yourself there at the end, like, well, they had difficulties with prepositions, but that's an expected difficulty for bilingual users. And I'm not going to be too concerned about that. I'm noticing past tense ed, maybe that's part of their variety at this time. So I'm also not concerned about that. I'm going to keep an eye on that as I move forth for the standardized testing and the rest of my time with the student.
Okay, thank you so much for showing that to us.
Yeah.
Barbara said, what age is it for?
So it's designed at this time for kids in first, second, and third grade, but I've been collecting the data now in adults. So that's to come soon in getting the item response theory and making sure that the items are reflecting skill in our adult users. So that might be a nice thing with coming into working with Spanish-speaking adults who do have access to both languages and starting to understand where some of the challenges might occur with folks with learning disabilities or an acquired disability as well. So we'll see how the adult works goes, but at this point, first, second, and third grade for the children.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Another question is, I think it's available now, right? She asked, when will it be available?
Yes, so I can send that your way. Just let me know, reach out to me, send me an email, and then we can create a box folder. It's a lot of videos, so for some people it doesn't send through Outlook for whatever reason. So we'll navigate that together, at least while we make it more accessible and available for just like downloading on our website. That's hopefully coming in the next month as well.
That's exciting.
Yes, finally seeing the light of day.
Okay, so I think this question, oh no, it didn't get cut off. So this is the full question. Do you feel like you need to introduce the FLiP in a way to make the child feel more at ease to use whatever language you want, or do you think the assessment itself does that?
Yeah, so I see this also as being, it doesn't necessarily have to be used as an assessment. It can be a way to initiate speech language services to get that student accustomed to who you are, where you're already demonstrating to them that they have that cultural linguistic wealth that you recognize in them. So it might be, hey, this is my first time meeting this student. I'm going to go to Miss Smith's class and pull them. Hi, Juanito. It's so nice to meet you. My name is Genesis. Today, we're going to be doing a lot of fun things. Some things are going to be in English. Y unas cosas van a ser en español, or some things are also going to be Spanish. So we're going to start off. This can be on the walk to the therapy room, right? You're going to watch some videos when we get to my office, and you're going to help one of my friends who needs some help. I know a little bit about you. I've heard that you speak Spanish at home with your family. Oh yeah, that sounds great, right? Like, oh yeah, I do. Or it kind of depends. You'll see the student, their own personalities, if they're shy, but that could be a nice discussion on the way. Then they sit down, they see a computer in front of them or a screen or a tablet, then they're like, okay, I'm paying attention, right? Then they see that video where it's, I'm like you. I speak English, pero también hablo español. I mostly speak English at school, like many of the students that are going to be in the therapy room, y hablo español en la casa con mi familia. Then they're like, hey, I'm seeing something that I don't typically see in the school setting or in the clinical setting or in different spaces where that's acknowledged and recognized. And also saying, the cool thing about the fact that we know both languages is that we can help them understand each other. So then they're like, oh, they're telling me it's cool that I know 2 languages, right? That can already create such a shift in the experience for a new child coming into the therapy room, for building rapport with that child, for getting to the point of the standardized test where it's like, el perro ladra, ¿qué hizo? Ladró, right? So lots of ways this can be used. It's by no means meant to be one size fits all. We can really play around with it in many different ways.
That's great. And thank you for sharing those examples on how you could do that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the FLiP would work no matter if the child is bilingual or trilingual, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and these are great questions. Thank you, Nicole. I think with a bilingual student, if they're trilingual, it kind of depends how much balance they have between the 2 pairs that are in the actual FLiP task. Let's say if they have more proficiency in like French and English and they know a little Spanish, then this might not be the most suitable test for them, right? Or measure. Hopefully we can start expanding this to more language pairs so that it can be applied and relevant for all users, but the trilingual language might be a little challenging to measure, at least within this task as it's set up.
That makes sense. I think after you showed us the FLiP too, that probably answered that question. And then just a really nice comment. I think that was it. Yeah. Absolutely genius. A parent actually asked me today why only one of her bilingual children could interpret for her, but not the others. It would be amazing to measure this. So.
Oh, thank you so much. That means the world to me, knowing how much this tool has gone through to see the light of day, and the relevance for our communities to see that, the application, the need that the Spanish monolingual parents experience if they have a child with a language disorder, right? If they can't do that, then how are they going to be able to have access to the resources? How are they be able to connect with a lot of these different things that language brokers are serving for community? And if they have only one child that maybe doesn't have a language disorder, right? If there's 2 kids in the household and one doesn't and one does, then it's likely that the child that is typically developing is going to have greater ease with that, just naturally in having to context switch, reach different languages. Doesn't mean that children with a language disorder can't do it. It's just going to take them more opportunities to hear the item, more practice, more experience doing it. So it highlights a need that exists for communities and where they've been serving a real big need.
Absolutely. And then another one came in. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for all your work and dedication. I wish I was still in the school system so I could use it right away. I'm now in early intervention.
Oh, well, I mean, maybe we can start seeing how this looks in the kindergarten students. That might be a little bit much. We might have to bring down some of the items at a smaller or at a more age appropriate developmental level for 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, maybe at the single word level or short phrase level. Way to start exploring this. This is really opening the door to new questions, new research that we can start thinking about. So thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Arizmendi. This was great. It was so great talking with you previously and then also getting to see a sneak peek of the FLiP today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks y'all for taking time out of your days to be here at the end of a day and listen to more about bilingualism and bilingual development. I'm happy to connect with anybody. If you have any other questions, if you'd like access to it, feel free to reach out. My team and I are always ready to talk bilingual life.
I love that. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Alrighty. Thank you.